It was the diplomatic equivalent of an awkward family reunion. The Ukrainians, the Russians, the Americans all holed up in the same hotel in Riyadh, talking about peace, but not to each other. Yesterday, Russia and the US sat down for talks. It was a marathon 12-hour meeting. And what came out of it? Well, not very much. Moscow and Washington were supposed to issue a joint statement. That did not happen. A readout was also expected, and that too is missing. So the end result is more questions than answers. The Kremlin was asked about this, and here's what they said.
I'm sure you will ask me about the results of talks in Riyadh. The results of the finished long Russian-American talks have been reported to the capitals. They are being analyzed now. So far, there are no plans of talks at the highest level. But as you know, it can rise rather fast. There is an understanding that the communication will continue, but there is nothing specific yet. It will be agreed upon.
That doesn't tell us anything. Their answer was as vague as the outcome of the talks. But we have some inputs on what was discussed, and this came from the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov. He says the Black Sea was on the agenda. Monday's talks focused on a maritime ceasefire so that both sides can resume trade. Lavrov wants the US to quote-unquote order Kyiv to sign the new navigation deal.
When the president said, "We are for a ceasefire, but there are nuances who will ensure that the Nazi regime in Kyiv doesn't break the promise. We are also in favor of considering ways not to cause any damage to the energy infrastructure. This is not in our interests." And, as the president said, we are in favor of resuming the Black Sea Initiative in some form that is more acceptable to everyone. The Black Sea Initiative was discussed in Riyadh as a priority. Our position is simple. I have just stated it roughly. We cannot trust Zelensky's word for it.
Also on the table is the 2022 Black Sea grain deal. A quick primer first. The Black Sea is located to the south of Ukraine. It is the only way to ship anything out of the country. But when the war began, the Russians blocked the Black Sea. They said all vessels were fair game. Even commercial ones carrying food grains, the Russians would attack them. That's when the United Nations and Turkey got together. They brokered a deal between Russia and Ukraine. And what did that deal say? That Ukraine could ship food grains from 3 ports. In return, Russia too got some concessions. They were allowed to sell food and fertilizers. In July 2023, this deal was up for renewal, but Putin refused to do it. He said the West was not keeping its word and that Russian food exports were facing a lot of restrictions, so Moscow refused to renew the deal. Which brings us to today. Moscow wants to revive that deal, and it is pushing hard for it. What about Ukraine? What is their position? Well, they weren't a part of these talks. But the US delegation met them separately this morning. It was a brief discussion, sort of like a debrief. The statement from that meeting has just come, and there are 2 big takeaways. Number one, both Russia and Ukraine agree to stop military strikes in the Black Sea. That is point number 1. And number 2, the US will support Russian agriculture exports. These are 2 points that Kyiv has agreed to. Ukraine has also established some red lines. Any Russian warship beyond the eastern part of the Black Sea would be seen as a violation. So for now, trade will resume in the region. There will be less militarization. The Black Sea could witness some peace. But what about Ukraine?
We need a movement towards real peace, towards guaranteed security. This is necessary for everyone, in Ukraine, in Europe, in America, and for all those in the world who seek stability in international relations.
What we're seeing right now are baby steps. A Black Sea ceasefire is the first step. What comes next? Where does that leave the prospects of peace? Right now, the path looks murky. Despite all the developments, the path still looks uncertain. Russia says it is open to talks, but only on its terms. Ukraine says it won't negotiate without security guarantees, and the US is busy shuttling between the 2 rooms. Meanwhile, Europe has a serious case of FOMO. It doesn't want to be left out. So the UK and France are now planning their own talks, a meeting of their so-called coalition of the willing. This is a group of countries ready to step up military aid for Ukraine. This meeting will take place on Thursday. But will it change anything? Diplomacy may be in full swing in Riyadh and Paris, but on the ground, the war is only escalating. Overnight, Moscow launched 139 drones. 78 of them were shot down. In the Ukrainian city of Sumy, a Russian strike injured 101 people, including 23 children. Meanwhile, Ukraine struck Russia's Belgorod, destroying 4 military helicopters. So right now, both armies are digging in, neither side willing to compromise, and the war grinds on.
Greeting you with aloha and namaste.
I love India.
Presence, occupation of a territory by another country pertains to India, what we saw in Kashmir.
How do you see Trump's America?
Yes, the current administration behaves differently from the previous administration.
Are you saying that there are foreign powers who are trying to bring down the current government in Syria?
Exactly.
Bluntly, Iran, maybe Russia too.
Prime Minister Modi committed to South-South, cooperation.
Not over 50%.
Is Ukraine prepared to pay the price for that peace?
No compromises at the cost of territorial integrity and sovereignty.